Thanks for having me. Today I'm going to have a little talk about Svelte and React, and mainly some front-end issues we have with dealing with reactive user interfaces in the current state and the problems we have with reactivity. My name is Nils. I'm a developer doing mostly web stuff at Queenslab, and my background is that I've been using React to build apps for quite a long time. I started out in 2017 when we still had this the stateful apps made in classes, and a lot of things have happened since then. And I've been mostly happy with it in all my projects. I jumped to the end. Keyboard navigation, right? But I think there are some things we can do better. And I will illustrate in this talk some of the things that I think are the problems with how React deals with reactivity, and if we compare that to some other new frameworks that we have now. Actually, for me, I think of React a little bit like a black box of reactivity. And because I think that every time a state changes, we see that the component re-renders, but as far as I'm concerned, I don't know straightly how React knows what to re-render. So basically, how it does this is an algorithm called reconciliation. And what it really does is that it does all the calculations with the state and all the change updates in a virtual DOM that's really, really fast, and it reconciles it into and builds the transforms the changes into the real DOM. But one main concern with this is that we also redeclare all JavaScript that close on this local state. And I will demonstrate shortly what I mean by that. So if we go and just create a new app, it's quick on Stackblitz nowadays. Instead of running create React app, this is the CRA app, right? So we got this functional component. We got maybe in this example, we just want to make a simple countdown thing that, all right, we count something down, then something exciting happens, right? So what we need to do in this function scope is that we need some kind of state, right? So we can start by, okay, this will be the output, and I will just say this count will be a variable count. Right, so and we will use to be able to have this count reference to keep it between renders and have this concept of state. We use a use state hook, right? So we do it like this, and we get a handler to change the state if we want to. Yes, we give it the default value of how about 10, like we're launching a rocket or something. So yeah, and then we see use state is not defined, right? Because we need to import, I guess. All right, and as you see, we have a count, perfect. But we also want to make it count down, right? So we need some interaction from the user because we're gonna just play around with having a reactive UI, right? So we do a button, and there's some, we can just call it countdown. And when we click this button, we want something to happen, right? We use a handler for this, on click handler, or count maybe, on count name. And what you learn in React is that it's better to, it's a better for performance. I think that instead of putting this as an inline function, you could do that and just do the set count directly in the DOM. But what I learned is that you should do it as a function, right? You do a function handler. So I do this on count, and I do an arrow function, And what I want to do when I click the button is actually just, all right, straightforward, set count -1. So this is quite straightforward for React developers, I think. So we have a counter that's working. But what I mentioned about that we need to redeclare the stuff in this scope is that you see all this code needs to be redeclared when we change the state. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you try to log something here, does this reappear? Can you spell it? And check this console. You can be a bit surprised when you're starting out React what happens right now, because if you see that, this actually gets rendered and logged for each time that we change the state. So, I mean, when you get into React, my first intuition was that, all right, this is the render tree that I want to re-render. And the thing here is more like the setup of my scope and state. So I don't want that to be revalidated so much. And as you would see, and this comes with a lot of caveats as well. If you think about there are the other abstractions in React that we have, use callback and use memo. And when you want to do these performance optimizations, these are also evaluated or revalidated, as you can say, on each state render. And so, but as well, I said it was fast, right? And it is quite fast. React is a quite performant way of just dealing with updating the virtual DOM. It can do very quick many iterations before reconciling into the real DOM. But just, I don't get it because it's not as fast as not having a virtual DOM, right? Because it's still a construct that we did when we had this issue. So if you remember from long ago, we used to have state as a concept and a container, and then we had this. We used to have jQuery or some scripts that changes the state, and then you could have a lot of problems with like the state not being updated in the new, in the DOM, basically. And this is like one of the things that React actually solves, that you have this virtual DOM and then this reconciles into the real DOM. And you can, and with this component-based thinking, you can get, you can be very certain that the DOM actually represents the virtual DOM. But my main concern there is, like, if it's fast enough, why should they also need to provide these kind of abstraction leaks into the framework? And as I mentioned before, we have these use memo, use callback that are confusing to a lot of new developers. And as well, yeah, I mean, it's I think if you check up in the docs for like use callback, this is more like you should use it as a performance optimization, right? It's usually like that. You do some work and then you see, oh, it's kind of slow. You reach for these kind of hooks to fix it. And for once, it's not actually real momization. It's just basically referring to what changed from the last update. So you don't get an array of all the last updates. You just get the most recent ones. You compare the props. But one thing that they mentioned here that I think is quite funny is this: in the future, a sufficiently advanced compiler could create this array automatically, which means that for all these hooks, you usually need to define the dependencies yourself. And for me, that is almost like me as a developer has to go and help the React framework do its best thing. So, and that made us thinking, is there an advanced compiler that could do this? We can actually come back to that later. So yeah, we got those hooks that use callback, to use memo. We also got this other abstraction layer over the DOM. And I mean, let's how can we can demonstrate this like this, that if we have we want something to happen right when count reaches 0, some explosion or something, right? So yeah, let's we can imagine that, all right, we want to do some additional logic that will be based on the count value. So you can use an effect hook for this. And you can provide, let's remove this for now. You can provide a dependency array. We want this logic to be dependent on the count variable. And as you say, as you saw with the console log, you will also see that this needs to be revalidated. So that's a bad thing, I think. But as well, in this hook now, we want to access, let's say, this element directly in the DOM. So we want to keep some reference to it, maybe. So this is, I will just change the style now, but that's purely for like demo purposes. But you can imagine there's some imperative logic that needs to be rendered in this component, right? So we do this. We check the count value, right? If it's less than 0 or 1, maybe. If it's 0, then it booms, right? And then we want to get the reference to this element right here. So we get this, and we use for referencing in React, we want it to be consistent between renders, so we use the useRef hook, right? So we call it CountRef. I guess we have these. Yes, we got the ref. We actually provide it to this h1. Now, now we actually have this notion that we have a reference to this DOM element, right? But it's actually just an abstraction, because if I just try when you're new in React, okay, then they can actually, I want to access this h1 and do some exciting stuff with it, as I said. So then let's try it. Oh, okay, CountRef dot style is equal to color red. And you might expect that to work, right? Because that's your first think. At least I think thought about that. That okay, this will change the color, but the problem here is that yeah, it needs to go down to 0, right? As well. But then it doesn't find the style object, and why is that? Well, actually, reference is just a reference between renders. So you can think of it as a pointer, right? So we need to access the current value of the pointer to be able to change that. And I mean, so that's another abstraction layer over the real DOM that you have to learn and use sometimes. And it goes so well another layer when you have like child components and you want to pass on this reference. There's a lot of complexity that that you have to struggle with to do that. So we have this other abstraction layer, as I told you. We got this protected, since this is JavaScript, right? We can do classes and stuff. We can't use like the normal HTML syntax. So we can't just do this and it won't translate. So we need to, yeah, you just learn this after a while, but okay, for class name, for class, we just do class name, right? And for form elements, when you have a for element, that's also a protected word. So you got to use HTML4 somehow. And you can always pick them up in the API, but it's just another abstraction, right? So it feels like a bit like, instead of using the web platform as it is, we invent ways to deal with it, and we do that with more and more JavaScript. And that's just a thing about React, that since we use JavaScript, we need to do everything in JavaScript, right? So the React ships with this runtime that is actually providing this black box experience. Yeah. We come to more questions later. I saw somebody wrote the question already. We performed this all this reactivity inside this when we have this runtime in the browser, right? So, but one question is, can we, instead of solving this reactive dependencies, can we solve it some other way and compile away ourselves? It's a good question. So, because there's actually a new, more performant way in my thinking to handle this kind of reactive behavior. And this is actually more of a new paradigm, as you say. It's more of a bunch of new frameworks that is inspired by this idea. There is Solid JS that has a similar thinking, and Svelte. But for comparison in this talk, we will focus on Svelte, and I will introduce it for you to see how we can rethink stuff, right? Svelte 101, right? So Svelte actually had this REPL thing, this read, evaluate, print loop, where you can just write your Svelte components and you get the result, you get the output straight away, what you compile, because it's actually a compiler. You can also see the style and the abstract syntax tree if you like, if you're interested. But as you see here, we're going to do the same thing in Svelte and see how it differs, right? So we do count and we do count, right? So that's the start we had before, and then we want to make we want to have a button. Oh, can you? Sorry, is that better? I assume a little bit. Yeah, let's try that. And let's do a button. And in Svelte, it's more, I think it's more close to normal vanilla HTML. So you basically have these click handlers. I mean in normal HTML, you would put this like this, right? On click, and then you will put a handler. This actually is, we use this colon syntax so that we can actually do more with it. We can prevent default. We can do it once. We can add modifiers to this event quite easily and precisely in the syntax. What we do here is that we will like to decrease the count, right? And in Svelte, we will compile this. So there's no performance issues with just doing it like a inline function. So we will do that. And the thing about this is that I can just, what do I want to do here? I want to decrease the count, right? And I will just do it like that. So there's nothing more to it. Okay, if this works. If I promise too much. Yeah. So, and the thing about that, what this is actually an assignment, right? So we have a count. We can decrease the count with an inline function. And just if you have a look at this and compare the code, it's like way shorter. And that's the experience that you have a lot when you start checking out and transferring to Svelte, that in general, somebody said, oh, it's almost like a 40% more code if you do it in React. So, I mean, and a lot more code means a lot more bugs, right? Or if you rather want to be explicit, that's another thing. So yeah, we had a count, but I mean, so how does this work then? I can also show you the thing that I have with redeclaring. This to me feels more intuitive, that I can just say, oh, when I log something here, I don't want it to be revalidated each time the state changes. This is like, for me, a separate thing where I do my state setup and the handlers and stuff. And this is what I want to render, and I only want to I want to solve the dependencies by forward referencing, right? And the thing about this is that it's not a black box anymore for me, because yes, in this tiny example, I can check the JS output and I can see how the component will be compiled directly. And you see it as well. There's no black magic behind this. It's purely just what you see here. The basic things here is that you get this. This is the business logic of this component, as you say, and you got the count, you got this log thingy, and you got this click handler that is actually, as I said, even though you have it inline here, you get it transformed to a function outside. And the thing that it does here is the invalidate function, right? So, I mean, there's no, like, how do we figure out what has changed? Because that's what we do here, right? We see that we can change the count, and only these specific things that we are interested in updating, that's the update. So, well, actually, it is this thing about operators or assignment that I said before. So this count minus minus, that's actually the same as count minus 1, right? And so this is an assignment operator that we use to trigger this function or trigger this change that we want. So I'm going to switch that back. And if you see this line where we had this invalidate function, this is actually what this gets compiled to. And you will see that it's, yeah. So basically what this function does is that it tells the compiler, oh, be aware of that count has changed, and in the end of the event loop, just do all the dependencies and updates. Yeah. So it's quite nifty, actually. And then this actually, instead, it gets a dependency graph and figures out all the dependencies, more like how you will think as an Excel spreadsheet works. So that it only triggers the updates that you want to. So, I mean, yeah, the invalidate function is the one core of the black magic, as some people say, like, how can you actually do this reactive stuff? But it's actually just derived state. You put this handler that says in the event loop, just update the stuff that depend on this, and everything will solve itself after that. So as well in Svelte, we have this thing called reactive statements, or how do we say? If you remember in our little React app, we had this thing about this use effect that sometimes you want to do some state that, or do some changes with this hook based on another state, right? In Svelte, maybe we want to do the same thing. If we change count, we want to do this thing about something goes boom or something, right? So we do use the same kind of thinking, but we declare a special scope of code that only will run when this invalidate function triggers dependencies, right? And we do that with a special syntax that is actually valid JavaScript that's actually Svelte just hijacked and said, we're going to use it for this. So we put this $, and in this scope, we got this statement that we can, like, you can either do like a double count, and it will actually look for count, and you get this double count variable that will always be the double, right? So we can just put it in the DOM so that you can see it as well. Count, double count. So that should be the double. Oh, +2. I broke Svelte there once. Yeah, so that's basically a reactive declaration. So this value will add to the dependency graph and actually just check this, all in this reactive magic operator will bind this to be binded to the double value of count. But it's the same thing. If we want to do this, some other logic based on count, we can just do the same. We can do even do statements here. We can do whole closures, right? So we can do, if I just log it first, and we'll remove this. You should see here. It's actually only gonna log when I change the state. So that means, yeah, we're reactive, and it basically counts is based on that state, right? And so this will be the equivalent to the React example that we had here, right? Only the difference is that we don't need to provide our dependencies ourselves. If you remember from the hooks reference, it was this line: in the future, a sufficiently advanced compiler could create this array automatically. I guess this is kind of it, right? I mean, we don't need to define these dependencies because it's a part of the reactivity system that you have. So we probably want to do the same thing here. We're going to check if count is less than 1, and then do yeah, and we can just bind something here, right? Bind this. H1. Okay. H1. H1 dot. Want to do the same, so that's no. Yeah, and that works as well. And that's basically the same stuff, but instead of using a reference that's more like a pointer between renders, we can use this bind this syntax to actually just say, oh, we want to bind this to this variable, and you don't need to redeclare it for every state change, right? We also have this thing about binding values, and that's one of the core things about React is that we don't have two-way binding, right? So we usually have a lot of handlers, and for forms and stuff, we have we prop down the value, and we got also prop an onChange handler to change the value, such, right? So in Svelte instead, what we can use is two-way binding actually, and I think it's kind of convenient, and it also works in child components to parents in that kind of relationships. I think it's quite good. So if we go check this, it's going to be like we do have an input, and maybe we want to also be able to change the count based on this input, right? So we will bind the value. Maybe we set the type to a number as well, just to be sure, right? And we want to bind the value, and we got a number input that's actually referring to the same piece of state with two-way binding. I think it's a convenient thing, and you can as well do it if you're used to the React way of doing. Of course, you can just provide a value and an onChange handler, but there's so much just purely boilerplate about that in my mind, at least. We also got the Svelte window, like a very convenient way to access the window object. In React, we also, I mean, you could do it, but might be involving some portals and stuff to get outside of the components. And there's also this thing about styles that I really like. I think the creator of Svelte, Rich Harris, said no framework is complete when it doesn't have a proper solution for styling, right? Because yeah, in React we got a lot of options, and some of them are good, and I guess you get used to doing it certain ways. But the great thing about I think about Svelte is that you can just do it. How would you do in normal HTML? That's my analogy and reference here. Okay, I will need some style in this component, and I would like to scope the style to be only on this p tag. So I will do p color blue. All right. That works, and it's only on that p tag. And if I say had another component, and I also had the p tag, and another one, spelling, we're gonna bring that in here. And you see the main template tree is, it feels like, yeah, I get the same feeling as JSX in React. So I will do component 2, right? And I need to import it as well. And that's just that's in React. Did I spell something wrong? Impo. Oh, it's not exported. What? Expected valid tag name. Curly's. Oh yeah, it's a default export, right? Thank you. Okay. Live component impo is not defined. Okay. Some space in there. Sorry, guys. All right. So what we basically do now is import that other component, and you see that it doesn't get the same style. So this is the yeah. You see it's scoped to the component. If you do the same here, zoom in. We got almost another one, maybe. And we're just going to do another H1 so that we see something. Oh, maybe some content in that as well. Bring it in. Nada. And yeah, of course, we need the styling as well. So I mean, there's a lot of ways of doing this. You can use module CSS. You can use like style components, emotions, all these CSS in ESS solutions. But this is not this. In my mind, this in Svelte is more straightforward. So if I just, I will see if I just change the color here, color, hue, something. I get both of them, even though they have like other scope in my mind. I just want this to be scoped. And if I do the modules, I will do the class name thing where I need to provide it, right? Okay, so that was about styles very quickly. I mean, there's also benefits of having a compiler instead. If I do a style tag here somewhere with like H1 something, I don't have any H1 here, right? And I will get warnings directly and see, oh, this style is not used anywhere. And if you check the CSS output, yeah, it doesn't even want to do that. Basically, what should happen is that you don't compile this tag. But if I have p color 2, you will see that the only thing that gets compiled now is this. It's actually remove the whole style tag when I only had this, because this is not referring to anything. So why should we keep it? So it actually only keeps the p tag with this scoped selector. And that's quite nice. You get the warnings directly. That's good. We also got this concept of stores. And in React, we have a lot of different solutions to manage state in our front-end apps. But I think this is one of my favorite ways of how to deal with state, actually. So you actually just put a JavaScript file or TypeScript, if you like, if you want to work with types, and you use this, just export a kind of subscribable observer pattern way of like a value that you can just change anywhere in your app, and you don't need to use a common tree or provider again around your whole app, so that you can access it from components that are in different places in the tree. So what we do is actually we import this thing called a writable store from Svelte store, and we can actually use this by exporting maybe a count value, just for example. So export const count store, and that is this writable thing. you get it the default, give it the default value, and then you should be able to just import it here or in any component, and they don't need to be related with some kind of umbrella provider above in the tree. So we import this count store, right? Count store. Was it like that? And the way you can reference this is with a dollar sign as well. So if you just use this $count store, we're actually referring to this store, and we can, since we made it a writable store, we can set it to 42 or something. And we can also just say it in the DOM. And it also follows the same reactive patterns as a normal, like these reactive values, right? So you can make it depend on stuff. You can make it a part of the dependency graph. So what I do here is just p, and I was just want to render it out in the DOM really quickly. Let's see. So there it is, 42. I mean, that's just one way of managing global state if you have to. And the thing about these stores is that the only thing it is that it is an object that conforms and adheres to a specific contract where you have this subscribe and unsubscribe methods to it. So you can actually pull in like RxJS logic. You can do a Redux thing abstraction and make it into a store that you can access everywhere. So it's quite neat, actually. There's also this thing about accessibility that you always get more. For example, yeah, I get the same error, so I'm just going to remove that. If you just do an image tag, something, the main thing, the compiler already complains at you that, oh, this needs to be accessible, you know, because accessibility, this image element should have an alt attribute, right? So already in the compiler step, we can make sure that we get this this flags action. And I mean, you could actually do it in React if you have like an ESLint plugin, but I mean, why not do it in the compile step anyways? Yeah, so about Svelte, and how can we start using it? Because that's when I started learning about Svelte. Oh, but we already got so much in React, and like, but can you use it in some way? And how can we start doing it? So we can actually start by bringing it out and modularizing these components, and then we can. The thing is that we compile them. So that we compile them to straight off JavaScript. We can choose the target if we want to do like in ES modules. So if we want to do it in normal UMD old style JavaScript, we can also do it in web components. Yeah, let's compile some components, guys. So yes. All right, so I did set up some stuff here in a SvelteKit project. SvelteKit is actually, if you imagine Svelte being like the library like React, SvelteKit is more like an app framework where you can use the compiler to get some benefits of doing apps like server-side rendering, routing, and such. So what you do here is that you get, it's a bit of equivalent to Next.js and those guys, right? So yeah, I can start by just running it, and you'll see. It's this is basically the app that you get out of the box when you just you can pick a totally empty template as well, but this just showcases some of the fancy features of Svelte, like having a to-do form that doesn't use client-side JavaScript. So this is actually quite cool. It's now it uses forms and handlers to do the logic. But what we want to have is this counter component. I'm totally obsessed about counters, right? So yeah, but it's good that it's a basic component that shows the function, right? So get some cool animations and stuff. And we got some routings, as you see, and this server rendered pages. So how about this, that we would like to use this counter component in our legacy app, or in another React app, or some other way. Well, actually, SvelteKit has this thing, very convenient, I think, way of thinking about that. Maybe you don't want to make only an app, or maybe you just want to make a component library, or maybe you want to do both. So in our library folder, we basically usually put up all our components. And the thing about SvelteKit is that we also have this package function. And what we will do is that it will go into this all the components that you have in the lib folder and package it up for you. And the way it does that is that you get the type definitions and everything. So that's quite cool. And you get the non-compiled components, because the normal use case is that you probably want to use these Svelte components in another Svelte project. And then you want to usually compile it there in your own project and not here. So you get the benefits of that. But that's not exactly what we want to do here, right? We want to use this outside of Svelte. So we use this rollup to actually do the compilation step. So I just built a really small bundle config that just picks a target that to be an ES module file. And I just compile it with Svelte preprocesses, TypeScript and stuff, so that I get all that. And what we do get is this JavaScript file. So it's basically now my components that I've authored is actually just JavaScript that I can use anywhere. So I also made a, let's see, I can dev, yeah, this React app. And I'm just by file referencing into this Svelte counter thing. That's the other folder. And I want to use this component inside here. And it's actually doable. It's not that much work. We just need to do, somehow we want to make the Svelte component talk to React, right? So we do it in the React way of propping down the count and the change handler for the count, because React is actually holding the state. We have the same function here. We have a count, and we can actually I also want to show how you can trigger it, what happens when we unmount and remount this component, and you will see. So basically what this is not the package directly, right? But what it is a wrapper that I had to write so that we can speak between those frameworks. And as you see here, we have this, I mean, you need to ref into this because there's a lot of imperative stuff that we need to do inside here. But it's actually quite straightforward if you just look at the client side API. Yeah, client side. It actually has good descriptions of, okay, how can we use this Svelte component outside Svelte? And we just need to initiate it somehow. Okay, we get the target. You can set the props. You can use component on to like use event handlers and stuff. So that's what we did. In this, you will see that we do this. We use the ref and we initialize the component. We use the onChange handler. That's actually I needed to do that in the Svelte file. To do a event dispatcher to just be able to dispatch the event outside the component. But that was basically the only thing I needed to do on the Svelte side of things. And in this component, we make sure to, when we unmount, oh, it's text too small, sorry, I will, yeah. Is that a bit better maybe? Yeah, sorry guys. And we have to keep in mind to clean up after ourselves, and probably when we unmount, we want to use this destroy method. That's also part of the client side component ID, right? So yeah, there's some setup code, but once you have done this, it's pretty easy just to reuse it, and mainly about changing the handlers, I guess. You can basically make a use Svelte hook if you like to be able to get these, I guess. Yes. Yeah, I can. Of course, let me show it as well. So this is the React app where we actually have the state. Yeah, we need a useSvelte package now. Yeah, that's good, right? So this is actually the Svelte component that I brought into the React app. You see the background is different, so it's you will see it's it's the same, but we can change. So these are the handlers that are firing from the Svelte component, and you see this is the state inside React. So it's actually, yeah, it's the same state. What happens when we unmount the component? We can, there's no difference. We keep the state, show it again, still have it there. And another thing is that you might be wondering is, okay, but how is this with, if I was about to, let's see it like this. All right, if I change this value, then it won't hot module reload and stuff because it's a Svelte abstraction. Well, look at this. If I change it to 20, it actually hot module reloads, the state is intact, and you get the same behavior as if it was a React component. So there's no issues with that either. It's cool. Yes. So that was about building components. You can actually build them out to just JavaScript, as I said, but use them in PHP or some other server-side render language as well. No problems. But I do want to emphasize that, I mean, this is not a call to arms thing that, oh, we should always just use Svelte because it's new and cool, but it does, React still shines in a lot of places. And I mean, we do have a great maturity and popularity. It's there's probably a lot of, I mean, a lot of code has already been written, so we should use the thing that we have sometimes, right? We got a huge community, and one of the things that I have found that is a bit difficult with Svelte is this way of thinking about just, I want to render it, this little piece of component out, but I don't want to define it, or I just want to have some render function, or I want to call out early in this component and exit. I want to chicken out of this component, right? So basically in here, you will do like something if count is more than 20, less than 5. I will do, I will return some other piece of arbitrary JSX, and this will be like a small little component that just says boom or something. And these are the kinds of things that are very convenient when you build like libraries and such. Yeah, you can use an if block, but I mean, rendering out this in, you don't get this arbitrary convenience that, okay, you have to make a Svelte component, and I mean, the thing I'm getting at is that if you make like a component library where you want to make, you're going to render out H1s if something happens, and P tags if something happens, or this arbitrary JSX if something else happens, you can't do the, at least in my way of thinking, the same in Svelte, I think. But I mean, we have this bind this syntax that you can actually bind the Svelte component or Svelte component syntax, where you can bind something to a variable and to a component, but that means you bind it to a component and not this piece of small JSX. So that's just one thing, and it can really be an issue when you make some kind of libraries, right? Yeah. So, but the thing about React, like, well, since we are using it so much, like, can't we make it better instead to make it more like Svelte, maybe? But the thing is with reconciliation is that you can only optimize it to a certain extent. And I mean, if you have look at the combustion engine, we can keep improving it, and it gets better and better, but still not that effective. So I mean, what if we can change the underlying assumptions? And I mean, do we even need this virtual construct? So in React, we need to invite all our friends that we need to the party, right? We need a way of handling styles. We need a way of doing animations. We need a state management solution and accessibility. Might need a library for that as well. So I mean, you want to bundle all of these libraries up, and these all will tax you in the JS bundle that you need to send to the client. So it's a lot of JavaScript, and I mean that's the way nowadays. It's a lot of JavaScript to do the simple things. But the thing about Svelte is that it solves a lot of these issues at compile time. So actually, all your friends can join in, yay, without taxing the client with more JavaScript, because a lot of the complexities you are already solved, right? Because in the compile step, you actually just do the style rendering. You can do the animations. You can do more. Feels more like you compiled in the behavior that you like. And yeah, I think this is a beautiful way to ship less JavaScript and yeah, subsequently less bugs. So yeah, at Queenslab we really love Svelte. And yeah, we in fact so much we already use it in a lot of our projects in house. And yeah, so if you really want to ship less JavaScript, why don't you do it together with us? Yeah, we're hiring. So go to join the queenslab.se if you're interested. Yeah, so that was about it. So I'm gonna have some time now for some question and answers. Let's see. Yeah, the code I can put it on GitHub and send the link somehow. We can translate using Svelte in React. Yeah, right. You will get the I will put the repo up with all of these example so that I show you with both the React project and how I did the setup, and the SvelteKit project where I did the rollup config to compile them. So you can get it. Is Svelte better than Vue? Well, yeah. Is one thing better than another? Yeah, that's. I mean, they're both similar in a way that they're. This assignment operator is actually a Vue thing, right? And I mean, it's. I think you can. I think Svelte takes a lot of inspiration from React with the component base, and from Vue with this assignment operator changing, and just put it into the mix. And why should we compare them when maybe they just work in different ways and solve the same problem, right? Okay, I can bring up the chat now. There's a lot of questions. Okay. Ooh. Yeah, so many. Okay, SvelteKit versus Next.js. Which is your favorite? I mean, I would say SvelteKit right now because that's what I've been into. But there's a lot of things happening now in the server side rendered space where we want to do not only client-side rendering, we want to move stuff to the server and do like SSR or SSG because we want that SEO and we want the performance of statically generating pages. So that's a lot good. I think that where SvelteKit really shines is that you can have like for once this library thing that I mentioned, where okay, I just want to make a component library and I want to do an app that showcases these components. These kind of features I lack in Next.js, just for one example. But I mean, Next.js is also a fantastic framework, and I think they're very similar in a lot of ways. So I guess it's depending on which kind of person you are. Yeah, so Jens Philipsson, this is really interesting. I have no idea how about reactivity works in Vue, but the syntax of Svelte seems quite similar. Will be interesting to hear if you have the knowledge how the selective rendering versus full rendering versus Svelte versus Vue. Uh, yeah, I think the main difference is that Vue doesn't do this in the compile step. There's this new thing called Petite Vue that I think has some other mechanics under the hood that might be something to yeah, because Vue uses the virtual DOM and does the same kind of work, checking, revalidating and checking to be able to do it. But the assignment part is quite similar to Svelte, I think. And they're both kind of opinionated frameworks, like this is how you do stuff in a certain way. And for some, I mean, that's good. For some others, it's like, I want to be able to pick between these frameworks and do the framework optimization myself. And I mean, yeah, go ahead. I won't stop you. But in Svelte, I really think that the compiler, they really built the compiler to do the best thing for you in any case, in any ways. So yeah. Oh, let me see if there are more questions. All right. SvelteKit is not like Redwood JS. I don't quite get the question. Redwood, is that a more like a full stack thing, is it? Okay. Ah. Yeah, I'm not that familiar with Redwood actually, but I guess it's kind of also an app framework where we have routing and stuff. So yeah, a bit similar, I guess, but still another beast. uh, yeah, this is another thing. Marcus Blazer, Wasm versus Svelte. We have this. Yeah, I mean, there's also this thing about, okay, we have a virtual DOM maybe, but we want to do it. We can use another language than JavaScript to make it even faster. Like let's use Rust or something and compile it with Wasm. But I mean, the overhead of running it is in all the benchmarks still says that okay, Svelte is still quicker. It's more performant because you're just dealing straight off in the DOM with pure JavaScript. There's no, I mean, there's not that much code. So yeah, and Blazor, I guess still you have to put the C# runtime or somehow you want to need some runtime to read your code, right? So yeah, more code can't be quicker, I guess. Yeah, and it's a lot about that, I guess. I mean, if we just want to keep as close as to platform as we can, I think that's beneficial for us because the more overhead thing, like the virtual DOM is still a construct that we use. I mean, we can optimize it and do it very well, but if we just take it away, it's better, in my mind at least. Just bring it close to the platform is my idea. Yeah. So yeah, the disappearing framework. Yeah, that's true. It's true. Uh, Thank you. Are there more questions that I missed in the chat? Just see. Yes, really, that's actually true. I have this talk. If you're really interesting about some of the things that I said here, Rich Harris has a great talk called "Rethinking Reactivity" from when Svelte 3 initially launched. It's a really good talk, and he touches a lot of the stuff like comparing with React, and he brings up a lot more of the performance statistics and stuff that you want to probably check out. There's also this guy called Jack Harrington that I've been learning a lot from. He does a lot of React, very good tutorials about like how do the use memo and use callback stuff really work, because that's a bit confusing for me. So and it's not me that are confused. So, and I also put the link to Svelte and SvelteKit, and yeah. So yes. Thank you, Pablo. Thank you. Mhm. Yes, I will do that, Jesper. I think I will share the repo somehow in a way in this meetup chat. I will talk to David and see how we do that.
Yeah, we'll send out an email to all the attendees with link to the YouTube recording. We'll post this on YouTube on our channel, as well as to like all the GitHub stuff and your presentation as well, so people can share it.
Great, thank you. Rob, late to the party. Is this recorded? Yes, this is recorded, so you can watch it later if you like.
Yeah, all of it goes up on YouTube.
Yeah. All right. Do you have experience of using Svelte in the Next.js app? No, I haven't done that, but I guess you could. I mean, a lot of the intricacies in Next.js is that you want to do the server-side rendering and stuff. So you would probably need to configure a lot of things to, instead of using the React components, you would have to compile the Svelte components somehow. So that probably involves some kind of roll-up setup. That would be quite advanced. Yeah, and I mean, when you're in the transition step, if you want to do the transition to Svelte and start using Svelte components, as I showed you here, like having both React as a runtime and Svelte will actually be more code, because you still have the runtime of React in your client. So, but just to have that in mind. But this is a transformation step, I think. Yes, Jens, have you built any large-scale applications with Svelte? I mean, it's SvelteKit is that's also one of the concerns about it. It's not 1.0 yet, so it's still being built, and they changed the APIs quite a lot. But large scale, I haven't done any like for thousands of users, but mostly for websites, I think it's a really great fit, because you get this the server side rendering, and you get very lean components. So I have a great experience doing websites, better than Next.js personally. Yeah. Yeah. We heard that. All right, more questions. Great. Rich said yesterday that he's hoping within next month to have it stabilized. Yeah, hopefully. I mean, you can check out the GitHub and see where the progress and the roadmap is for SvelteKit. And I think that's one barrier that a lot of people see, that, oh, it's not 1.0 yet, so why should we invest? But I mean, Svelte is 3 point something, and you can still use Svelte. It's just the app framework that's not quite yet stabilized, but we'll get there. I know. Yeah. Rob, very good question. Yeah, React is spell tested. Yeah. Okay. Okay, Marcus, do you see any forward way if using Svelte components in React to pass the handlers delegates back to generically through to facade to remove complexity? Let me see if I get your question. To pass the handlers. I guess you mean using this kind of use Svelte hook somehow. I mean, less abstracting the complexity inside something. Yeah, it's not a bad idea actually. Somebody should write a use Svelte hook. I might be the person. So yeah. Cool. endpoints are going through big change now. Yeah. I like they changed the contract of the endpoint API. That was a bit of mess. Like suddenly, if you just keep the SvelteKit version on next, you're gonna have troubles because otherwise you get a new dependency and suddenly they changed how the URL or the request looks like. Yeah. Jens, can you do partial SSR in compiler and partial on the fly? I guess depends on where you mean where does the boundary go where you say how much do you want to do in SSR, because it already does the smart thing of putting the HTML and then it hydrates like a client side routing and stuff. I mean, if you just have a look at this page, what it actually does is to get a smooth experience. This is actually client side routing that you use, but it still feels. You can imagine that all these are server generated, but when you navigate between them, it's always like you hydrate the JavaScript from these components, and then you can just use for this app-like feel. You get the client-side routing, and that's really nice. That's really nice. So you can do like animations and transformations between these tabs, for example. As far as I know, SSR is a full-page thing defined in hook.js. Yeah, I think you can't. That's one other thing that a lot of new cool frameworks has is this thing about partial hydration, where you can have like 3 or more components that independently hydrate. Like Astro and some other frameworks use this when statically building stuff, and you can actually have one React component that's in this little island in the website, and then partial hydrates another solid JS component, and so that's quite fancy stuff. I mean, right now in SvelteKit, you can choose on a page level if you want to do server-side rendering or not. We don't have this partial hydration yet. Might come. Okay, here's some code snippet. SSR is a full page thing. Yeah. Yes, right. Thinking headless CMS, for instance, where you may want to pre-render the content for SEO, for instance. Yeah, it's a good question. So maybe not really compiling on the fly. But I mean, when you do this right now, if you do this server-side rendering, you usually get the content before it's hydrated, and that's, I mean, the SEO. If you just Google Lighthouse, it's gonna be amazing. SvelteKit usually get very high numbers on the SEO because, I mean, you render everything on the server and just send the HTML, right? So it's not compiling on the fly. Headless CMS instance. Yeah, I don't think we have it right now. I think it's just on the page level if we want to do server-side rendering or not, but it could be something. Partial HTML with beats. Only the component you change should update. Let me see if I understand the question. I mean, it's still with Vite, we still have the virtual DOM and the same mechanics of React, right? So partial HMR is another thing than hydration, I think, if I'm not completely confused by this question. Yeah, I mean, this is something that you probably can look into and hook up inside the framework itself. I get somebody's already on this because it's still not stable. So on the server, I get the data from the CMS, and that is statically generated at build time. Yeah. Does this answer this? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be concerned about SEO when you make websites with SvelteKit, because it's mostly about optimizing the images, and if you do that well, you're well off to getting really high grades. And the technical SEO part. Yeah. Yes. Yes, Victor, you can compile to web components. It's actually, you see here where I do the target thing. This is the is it count lib counters? No, it's in the rollup config, right? Because that is where we do this. We can provide this compiler options, and here is defined it as ES module. You can use EUMD, or you can compile it to a web component. So that's quite neat, actually. This is purely in this. The Svelte compiler has that as a compiler option, so that's good. And I think the API is quite. I guess they have some rollup config here to do it, if I'm not wrong. It was just an example. Yeah, it's trivial. It's easy. Exactly. There are some issues still with web components, I think. Some has to do with the way, I'm a big fan of Tailwind, for example. And that's one thing about Tailwind is that you inject a lot of global style utility classes that you want to use in your app. And these don't come. When I tried making a web component, it kind of didn't translate out to the rest of the island apps outside this one that I made. So you have this concept of the shadow DOM and some other complexities that you have to. It might have just been me that I thought it was a bit complex to figure out how to do properly. But yeah. And yeah, I think Tailwind is a really great match with Svelte. You can get really sparse syntax and concise in your component, and basically write no CSS anyways. So, yeah, I'm on that train as well. It's really nice. But I mean, since we have this, I also said before, like, use the platform and stuff, but I think Tailwind just makes it easier to use the platform. Okay, I was a bit. It's hard to listen and write at the same time. It's so interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. Great. All right. All right. Yes.
Okay, so thank you everyone for the questions, and thank you,
Thank you.
Nils. Super good and interesting presentation.
Thank you.
We'll put this all up on YouTube in the coming days, and I'll send out an email with links to everything as well. And the next event will be in the real world, since the Corona restrictions are gone for now.
That's great.
So see you in like a month or two, and thank you everyone for joining us.